welcome to our latest episode of Security Noise. I'm Jeff Walton. I lead the application security practice at TrustedSec, and today I am joined by Shane Jones, another consultant at TrustedSec, and of course Skyler Tuja, our producer, who will make the show sound great and share a little bit of his own experiences on this topic with us all. Before we get started, I do have a couple of announcements. First of all, if you'd like to join the show on Discord, that is discord.gg/TrustedSec if you want to join. You can share your show ideas, give us some feedback, tell us we're terrible, whatever you want to do. We will, read it and think about it.
I'll take it in stride.
I do also have one infosec in case you missed it. Last week, LexisNexis, a large data broker, announced a significant security breach that affects a whole lot of people. So you might want to be looking in your mailbox to see if you're getting any emails from them to let you know that you were impacted. Or, obviously keep an eye on the old credit reports and things like that. If you haven't pulled your free one this year, it might be time to do that. With that, we'll kind of launch into some things. Today's topic is bite-sized intelligence, hacking with AI. Shane, how have you been using generative AI on network penetration tests?
Sure. So, any internal penetration test, you're spending most of your time troubleshooting. So one way I speed up my methodology is I use AI to do all my troubleshooting. It's very straightforward, though. With the decades of experience I have testing, I was able to walk AI through what I was seeing, and it was telling me what kind of attack paths to look at, what kind of weaknesses to look for. Once I was able to add a machine account, it was telling me to look into low-hanging fruit like ADCS, RBCD, all the typical really quick routes to full domain compromise. Ultimately, the client was pretty mature, and we needed to look into group memberships. And even though I didn't have to give specific client data, it was able to walk me through and tell me what tools. Bloody AD, for instance. I had never heard of that tool. Tossed it out into chat, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. I was able to find a tertiary group membership that allowed me to add myself to domain admins. So I used that tool to do it because AI told me to, right? And I was like, let's see if this works. And it worked. I mean, sure, they alerted on it. It was detected. But the fact that I can tell ChatGPT in very generic terms what I was seeing, and it actually provides me current tools and methodologies, that's pretty cool.
You mentioned troubleshooting specifically. Command output, application doesn't run type issues, or
right?
Expand that a little bit for us.
Sure. So, you run Python, and if you're not getting a dependency error, which, everybody gets, you can just take the whole error, make sure there's no client network data in it, right? Put it into ChatGPT, and it'll summarize what the error is, where it's likely occurring to be, the issue is occurring in the code, excuse me. And it'll walk you through fixing that issue, right? So you could repair scripts within 30 minutes doing it, just stuff like that. Once the tool gets running, it's easier to keep moving, and it does take away you don't really have to think about it too much because it is troubleshooting. It's very generic errors. These errors are thrown anytime those libraries and packages are used, right? So it is very straightforward, and it has increased my productivity. It used to take me, half a day to fix the tool, right? Now it's like 30 minutes to an hour, and I'm back at kicking tires,
Now, you've mentioned ChatGPT specifically. So you're using the web-based stuff from OpenAI, and you're using their remote service then?
Yeah, so I'm treating AI as I'm the orchestrator, and I don't want any programmatic access to it right now, right? I'm still relatively new at working with it. So I make sure that I use like Rock to rubber ducky ideas, and then I will turn that conversation into a prompt to give to AI or Gemini, ChatGPT or Gemini, depending on if I need to do deep research into the topic, which is what I would use Gemini for. But if it's, something technical, like I need to get a script out, I can give me the prompts, I give it to ChatGPT, and then since you got robots talking to robots, it gives you exactly what you're looking for. There's no unintentional bias or human language in it that would, make the tool work in a very specific way that you're not expecting it, right? Like you want to be able to use the tool repeatedly. So
Interesting. I've been running things mostly local because obviously in web world, it's kind of hard to give it much context that isn't extremely revealing. Cookies and stuff, and even a host header is going to completely give away what client you're working with. So in terms of being able to keep that stuff, private and not disclosing anything that we shouldn't disclose without having a client conversation first, I've been mostly using local models, both Llama, Gemma, some of the DeepSeek stuff because it's a little bit faster, especially on the more limited hardware I have to throw at it. And I've noticed for troubleshooting, actually, it tends to be specifically bad. That's been my experience. I'll give it an error message from some Python utility or something I got, and basically it just adds more words to the error and doesn't really give me any useful insight.
true, it does. Yeah. But I give it instructions, which is why I like the browser version of it. Because with AI, you're sending a or a generic prompt and getting a generic response. With the actual web browsers, you could go in and set instructions, right? So for me, one of my instructions is I only want succinct factual data. I don't want any bloat. If I give you an error, I want to know exactly what that error is doing. And that instruction carries through with any further prompts that I execute on ChatGPT. So it is effective. But I also have, 10 years of experience pen testing and coding and doing scripting and stuff. So, that experience does lend to being able to kind of guide it and tell it where it's wrong versus just blindly trusting the responses.
I will say I have been playing experimentally with Portswigger's AI extensions. I don't know if Skylar's taken a look at those yet or not. Have you at all, Skylar?
I have started, like literally just this week, started to kind of mess around with it a little bit. I haven't gotten any groundbreaking results, but some of the new features made some, intruder result analyzing a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I've noticed too, as I've just played with it, just pointing it at various websites around the internet, kind of experimentally, the explain feature and stuff is honestly very useful because it will spot, cookies and frameworks, JavaScript libraries that you haven't worked with before, and it will tell you what that stuff is in a fairly concise way. So you're not sitting there going, okay, is this a branch of React that, somebody has forked off, or is this, totally different? It looks like things I've seen before, but why doesn't it work? The way I expect. It's pretty good at identifying stuff. And the other thing it seems to be fairly good at is expanding proofs of concepts. Once you've already got SQL injection, you've identified it, either manually or because the traditional scanner found it, the AI does a pretty good job of taking that payload and cooking something that is more useful, which I find impressive because I've spent lots of hours digging through Oracle manuals before looking for goofy ways to do things, and it just does it. So that's cool.
It really is. And you mentioned the Oracle handbooks. You can feed, if you can get a format for a manual or a book, PDF, EPUB, DocX, whatever, if you can get like a printed, you know, hand guide, whatever book, you could give it to AI, it'll read it and create a methodology, or you could specifically ask it questions about what the context is. And you basically have somebody to talk to about whatever manual you get, right? And it'll give you page numbers and sources and stuff. So you could go into that textbook or whatever and find what it's talking about.
Yeah, and Olama, the kind of framework that you can run locally, it's based around Llama CPP, but you can install it in a handful of commands. It runs on almost every platform. So if you're not using that yet, Shane, you might want to actually check that out. But it's got the tools to do retrieval, augmented generation stuff right in it. So as long as you pick one of the models that supports that, you can, like you said, just with a handful of clicks, build a knowledge folder and feed it your stuff. And that way it's all local. So, you don't have to worry about, accidentally feeding some customer data in there necessarily because you're keeping it all at home. I actually fed our internal Obsidian notebooks and stuff to it just to see if I could get my local Olama instance to maybe be aware of some of the things that we specifically look for. which had the effect of, me able to tie my burp plugin that I wrote that uses Olama directly to that marginal results. But you can at least start to play with that stuff and start to lever your own assets pretty quickly with it. But on the whole, I would say it has not really changed my web testing workflow yet.
Right. Okay. Well, I've just been tinkering around with it. I specifically ask it objective questions. I don't copy paste command line outputs. I read the error, I read the response, I read the tool output, and then I tell it what I see about it in a very generic sense, right? And so I am getting to the point where I do want the local LLM and be able to have like local system access to files and things like that, because I believe here in another module or two, you're going to be able to have it take books and put it and create Obsidian notes based off of those books. So you'll be able to treat it like an assistant for any kind of security training you want to get through. Those SANS books are crazy. So I do see the strength there. I just I don't trust it, not at first, and it's slowly getting me to the point where I'm like, okay, if I can give it generic things that I'm seeing and it's able to get me domain admin and do my job for me. I mean, it's not doing it automated, but that's really wild. I mean, I got to start really considering how to automate all of this.
It is interesting to hear you say you don't trust it. Have you seen it actually just totally hallucinate commands and stuff that don't exist and things like that?
Yeah. Yes, it'll give you bad flags. If you're just blindly getting those results and copying it in, don't do that on a client network, because you don't know what that'll do, right? You need to make sure you understand the tools, and readers are leaders here, get the documentation, back check it just like you would anything else.
Yeah, and that has worried me a lot, because I've been playing with some of the tool calling stuff, kind of the previous generation of it, again, with Olama. And you can't really hurt yourself unless you really foot gun it and give it the ability to do something, because obviously you have to write the tools for it to call, or at least provide the interface. And, but my problem is I've seen it come up with, completely bad shell globs and stuff like that. And it's like, well, if I really give this thing access to do something on the file system, this will go badly sooner or later. And so that's why when I hear announcements like Microsoft adding MCP registry and stuff to Windows with file system access and stuff, I just kind of jaw drop at that, because I think, in the web world, bolting your AI assistant on that, maybe putting an MCP registry into your web application and having that AI assistant be able to use the API. I mean, fundamentally, the security model sort of works there. At least within the context of that application, you're using your security token and you can do everything that you as a user can do. And that's probably reasonable. But when you zoom out and apply that to the system, and you're saying, well, now, can I read stuff across browsers? Well, that's, browser tabs. Well, that's maybe bad. I mean, I don't want this app that, this assistant that's in this application to get cross-site scripted and go, oh, gee, I should go see if there's a Gmail window open. And, yeah, and I just think the same thing happening in that Windows environment, which is I can't imagine a security context where I want an LLM to be able to do file system transactions with that little bit of supervision.
Yeah, it makes me think of like my 5-year-old daughter just walking into the playroom and throwing the Legos all over the ground and ruining it,
Well, it's just like leaving your terminal unlocked and letting your young child just press buttons on the keyboard. Probably nothing happens, but it could go badly. I mean, hit that up arrow a few times and, that RM and RF command is still there in the buffer.
That gives me anxiety, Geoff.
So I guess we're not ready necessarily to just throw LLMs at an actual application test or a pen test blindly yet. And I think it'll be a while before we're there.
Right. I agree. There's no way. There's so much, what's the word? There's so much preparation into making sure that the data that it gives you is accurate to what you're trying to do. So yeah, we'll need humans for at least the next 5 years. The way I see it, right? In my job, it's a lot of critical thinking. It's a lot of keeping up to date and stuff. So it'll definitely shorten the amount of effort that I have to keep up with. Right now that I have 2 kids and everything, I can use Gemini for deep research and stay right on in step with like the younger people. Yeah, I don't see it fully replacing us. And doing automated hacking has never really worked out. Look at AutoDB pwn and stuff like that. It's just automating it is you're gonna need.
Well, and I do think, and there are already some platforms out there that you can use today that kind of are the equivalent of DB Autopwn, but with an LLM behind them. So you get a little bit more miles out of it than maybe DB Autopwn gave you. And I think there's a place for that. There's maybe some very kind of low-hanging fruit. We've never done any kind of pen test. We've never, done an application test before. Those situations where you would just blindly throw the scanner at it now to say, well, where am I? I think there's maybe some room for that out there now. I just don't know if we're going to get past that point in the near future. However, just to kind of change topics a little bit, maybe leaving that as a kind of final thought. AI is really good at generating a lot of things like documents and sound clips and things like that that may be very useful for attacking humans. And I know, Skyler, you've done some work in that area, and Shane, you've done a little bit of work in that area too. Why don't you guys kind of fill us in on that?
So we did an engagement a little over a year ago for a financial organization that had set up an IVR system for their mobile banking. So you would call in, you would register a voice print. So you would speak into the system and it would take your voice print and keep it on your profile. The next time you call, it would first recognize like your phone number. And if your phone number was also registered with your profile, it would ask you to say something, and then you would repeat it and it would match up with what your voice print said. And so they wanted us to test and see how easy it would be to kind of bypass those, wavelength checks, And I mean, it took me, I think, 3 hours to collect enough information to compromise 8 out of 9 accounts.
That's crazy.
So, yeah. And it didn't really take a lot of effort. We used free tools to do the voice cloning. So
what were some of those tools?
11 Labs was the primary one that we used. Really awesome tool. And I mean, if you wanted more than 1 or 2 voice profiles at a time, you do have to pay a whopping $5 a month to get up to 10 voice profiles. And
well, there goes our P&L.
I know, I totally our pen testing budget that year, but it worked really well because you can upload, I think, up to 10 minutes of audio or something like that. But I found that I only needed less than a minute, maybe like 20 or 30 seconds of audio per person. The options are pretty good where you can, adjust like the variance in the voices. So if you go all the way crazy, it'll just sound like, they're on the tilt-a-whirl or something trying to sing a song. But if you tweak it just right, like it is scary convincing. I know Shane and I were kind of going back and forth on, doing test runs and stuff on some phone calls that we did. And it's really accurate. And then, of course, we used some other tools for spoofing phone numbers like Zoiper. I'm pretty sure you have to pay to have a server to run on that. That was almost it. I used some other software just for soundboarding all of my voice responses and stuff on the computer. But other than that, as far as the AI stuff goes, 11 Labs is, chef's kiss in terms of voice cloning for me.
Right. Well, I like 11 Labs. I used it with you. I found it really quirky, though. Like if you had multiple sound samples and you used FF and MPEG and, thread them together and gave it to him, totally threw off the profile.
Yeah.
I remember one of the voices you generated was like super stern, like the guy kind of sounded like an ass, and the one that I did, which was a little bit shorter and a natural and shorter in time, that came out pretty decent. I mean, it sounded a little bit robotic. Yeah, it sounded a little bit more robotic on that end, but for some reason it was it had more personality in it for sure.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the training data that you give it. So like you said, if you send in a WAV file or a FLAC or something like that, I mean, you'll probably get a more accurate representation of that voice that it's training on. But I had a couple of participants in that engagement that I did that I couldn't clone the voice. I couldn't get the IVR system tricked because this one voice in particular, I think was just too, I don't want to say unique, but something about it. The AI just couldn't clone it accurately.
Any notable difference between male or female voices?
It's not in my opinion.
Yeah, it was all pretty straightforward. I will admit I had more trouble getting, not more trouble. I had to put more effort into tweaking the female voices to get them kind of a like for like. But I think part of that may have been just a personality thing. Like the person that I was having to tweak more on just had more inflection in their tone when they're talking, more ups and downs. And so if you have somebody who's talking naturally in more of a monotone type of voice, it's really easy to clone. But if you have somebody who's going really high up here and they're really excited, and then they come down here, and then maybe they're in one sentence and they just keep going back and forth, it can trip up 11 Labs a little bit.
So back in the days when I was messing with IP phones and stuff like that, we used to have to switch codecs for some of the female customer service people who had higher voices and stuff because they just wouldn't come through with some of the higher compression codecs. And so I wonder what maybe is getting lost in, not necessarily on your 11 Labs side of the operation, but maybe on the phone system side, that where they're making the biometric print in the first place, if that codec is stripping out certain information. And so with those voices, you're not getting the full picture on the biometric side. And so then it doesn't match when you generate the fake. I don't know.
I mean, to be fair to myself, we had the same train of thought. It's like, okay, well, something's happening with maybe the compression when it was registered. Maybe the registration got messed up, but once it was registered, we couldn't touch it. So I had this individual send me multiple recordings from different recording avenues. So they sent me one that was just, hey, I'm in my computer. This is a voice recorder. You'll have a voice memo. I'm going to send it. Another one, I had them call my phone number, like my personal cell, and just leave a voicemail. So I already had that mobile compression, audio. And then another one, I think, was sending me a video. And I could strip the audio from that and just see how that worked. Every single test I did, I just could not get the IVR system to recognize their voice.
Interesting.
That's crazy.
If there's any tricks you can employ if you're using one of those systems to authenticate yourself, like deliberately speak in a odd way or something so that it makes it harder for someone to clone. I mean, I was just thinking opportunities somebody has to capture your voice, they're going to capture your natural speaking voice probably because that's what you're using in the wild. But if for your voice print on the phone system, you decided to talk like a pirate or something.
Right.
Something like that.
You do your best Kermit the Frog impression.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the, not recommendations that I give companies that are using IVR systems, but like the users of the IVR system, because it's the same tactics that we tell people when they're creating passwords. Create something, like if you're going to do a phrase, write down a word or a phrase that has nothing to do with you or anything about you, right? So you could put in, green tigers eat milkshakes. You just write just a random set of phrases as a sentence. It has nothing to do with me. I don't have any association with tigers or the color green or milkshakes, lactose intolerant. But it's something that somebody can't guess about you. So if you're doing voice print verification, Geoff, that's a fantastic suggestion, is to do an impression. The only trick is you as the user have to remember how you said it last time.
Right. Or not be sick and hoarse or whatever,
Right. Yeah. You got to make sure that you're calling in the same conditions that when you recorded that voice print.
Hopefully there's some alternate authentication method, kind of like you can still unlock your phone if you know the PIN, even if your thumbprint's, burned or something. The other thing with that I find kind of interesting there is I get a lot of calls that I think are vicious, but I think their purpose is to try to get me to talk to them so that maybe they can use it for voice print authentication.
100%. They want to record your voice because it's, scammers go after those residential people who will pick up the phone and just start talking because they got, nothing better to do.
So I'm really careful to always answer unknown numbers exactly the same way so that they only are getting one set of words and syllables out of me that they probably already have.
Same.
I go as far as I don't even answer my phone anymore. If you're not on my contact list, you're SOL. You need to email me. You need to get a hold of me some other way and let me know to expect your call and what number to expect it from. Because I've social engineered too many people. I'm not going to get social engineered. I'm just like cutting it off at the legs.
I got a real bold one today. I got a text that just said, "Hi, who are you?"
No, don't. Yeah. No.
Yeah. I always engage when it's a text message.
Well, I'm pretty quick to hang up unless they identify themselves pretty immediately and they are somebody I know. But unfortunately, Verizon does a pretty good job about labeling things possible spam, in which case I won't answer at all. But
AT&T does too.
I get enough calls that are actually important from numbers that I don't immediately recognize that I feel like I can't get away with not answering the phone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. I always tell my clients, like everybody knows me, knows that they need to let me know first. Otherwise, yeah, I don't pick up that phone.
I did have to apologize to a client last year because they were calling me. I can't remember what the issue was, but it was kind of urgent because they called me 3 times in a row, and then they left me a voicemail. And I was like, hey man, I've been getting spam calls all day. This wasn't in my phone number or my directory. But I was actually on our local news station a couple years ago. We had just moved into a new neighborhood, and
Giving your voice print to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's kind of like doing this show.
We'll get into that too in a second. But new homeowners were getting these postcards that just said, "Hey, sorry we missed you. We have a housewarming gift for you. Please call this number and say this code. Or, give us this code, and that's how we can authenticate or something." I call the number, it immediately redirects to some out-of-state number, and then I start Googling the number, and it's associated with a phone scam from like 2016 or something like that. But effectively, that code, based off whatever their terms and conditions are off their website, the code that you give is them having authorization to use your information. So if they say, like, can I have the code? You're giving them the code, and that counts as a verbal authorization to use your data.
Right. Yeah, that's like them wanting your verbal acknowledgement. Like, yes.
I mean,
Yeah. When they call and they say, "Hey, can you hear me?"
That's interesting.
Yes, I can.
But the original pretext they used to get you to give them the code was fraud. So not sure how that really helps their situation.
Well, I didn't have an opportunity to actually like talk to somebody because once I saw it was redirecting to a number, I hung up. But what I read from the news article from 2016, when somebody called that number out, they ask a series of questions that they lead you up to the code. So they'll ask you questions that are basically giving you like the EULA. So they're trying to get you to agree to their terms before you give them authorization.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but the whole you have a housewarming gift, I mean, that's a material false statement designed
it's totally sleazy
to get you to act against your interests. That's simple fraud last time I checked.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like that's going to get them in a lot more trouble than just using your information would.
Yeah, and that might be why there wasn't any other news article except from 2016, and they may have expanded it up again.
To me, it sounds like it's just the legitimacy portion of a social engineering pretext, right? Like, oh, we're a legitimate business. We need your approvals. This is all up on up. And, I could see that being the reason.
I mean, they're trying to get my information to do naughty things anyway. I doubt they care if what they're doing is technically fraud.
Right. Or they're doing it from a country where,
that doesn't
there's
matter.
no legal ramifications for them. So, yeah.
So to kind of get things back on topic a little bit, and I haven't talked to any of our physical people on this one, but I have seen, just looking around the internet at what people are doing with stuff, they've had AI and they've been using it to generate things like, this is my badge from such and such electric company and things like that to get on site. And I mean, I know like our social engineering people will pose as the exterminator, right? Oh, I'm here to spray your data center for whatever. And gets them in the door. So have you guys played with generating any of those kind of documents or anything yet?
I have not.
I've been involved on a couple of physical pen tests with some of our physical folks, and my personal opinion is you don't really need AI to generate a lot of those. It wouldn't take much to get a letterhead from a target company.
Well, I'm talking about make up a fake badge or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, when you go to make badges and stuff, that's usually just a paint job. AI would probably mess it up, not be able to do the English properly, the fine print, things like that. So I would be concerned doing a badge like that. But I do see using generative AI as like an opportunistic hacker. Maybe I don't have these skills, but I know what a badge cloner is. And so I asked about what badge cloner should I buy? How do I set this up? How do I know that I'm looking at a properly cloned badge, right? And you're just getting an education in how to physically penetrate somebody's perimeter that way. So, I see it being used that way. But as far as like generating documents and stuff, it would definitely reduce the amount of manual effort. But Yeah, with actual like pictures and badges, I wouldn't trust that yet.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on the context. Like if you're in a huge city too, nobody's going to know whether, some little fake exterminating firm you just made up or the AI just made up is real. But if you're in a smaller town or something, that's weird. I've never heard of them before. I can see, that not working nearly as well. But
Right. Well, then it all comes into using AI to maybe helping you profile a place, right? How do I, without showing up, how do I profile this place? Maybe it'll point you to some satellite services and Google Maps, whatever, Google Earth, and you just go from there. You see what's around your mark's address, right? Yeah, I don't think AI is really going to be too helpful there, but I could be wrong. I haven't used it in that way yet. So
I could see it being useful for OSINT, like kind of like what you were describing there, is like using it to cross-reference an image on like LinkedIn or Facebook against, maybe a geolocation, and then trying to figure out, okay, what, can you clear, enhance the image of this badge or something? Because that's usually where I go if I'm trying to figure out, like, let's just stay on the badges. I'm trying to figure out what the badges look like, and I have maybe a particular target, or I can just go to LinkedIn, look up people who work at XYZ company. Do they post team photos at work, doing the team building exercise or something? They might have their badges on. I can kind of get a decent idea of what it kind of looks like. And then maybe from there, I can go to, the company's website and look at some of their employee handbooks, their, public documentation or something that's out there, and see what things look like. There's a lot of companies that I see on LinkedIn that use their real badge as like a animated swipe. So they'll have their badge animated, but zooms in and then it goes into their video or whatever. But it's more for recruiting. But when you're putting what your badges look like just straight in your marketing videos, like it's easy to find that to clone it.
Right. Or you get those employees who are like been there for 5, 10 years and they're like happy to quit. And so they put their freaking badge up on a LinkedIn post and they're like, hey, goodbye. This actually makes me wonder if I could use Gemini Deep Research to like find badges. I'm going to do a quick query.
Or just like ask, hey, such and such company, we're trying to revamp our badge thing. Like you just prompt the AI as like you already work there. Say, hey, I'm trying to remember what badge types we use. Like we use HID cards? Like can you tell me what we use? And some of, try and look online to see if you see pictures of our cards or something like that. See what results come back. I doubt that simple prompt would get good results, but you could dive pretty deep and get something.
So I did a few simple experiments, again, just with local models to see, could they edit documents that were images, because I need to OCR things at some frequency, especially in our world, because we'll get PDFs and stuff in app tests that clearly they just generate a bitmap, right? It doesn't actually embed the text. And so sometimes it would be useful to potentially manipulate these. And I was just curious, how good a job, especially if that image was like a photocopy or it's a little bit askew and stuff, how good is AI at like replacing text in some of these images? And what I found was actually that it does a fairly good job at that. So if you've got like an old invoice and you want to change the date on it or something like that, and again, I'm thinking in terms of physicals and pretexting and stuff here, I think you probably can use some of the Gen AI image tools today to make those edited documents. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be probably better than your ham-fisted approach in Photoshop if you don't do that often.
True.
So,
yeah, I mean, every time I've used it for text, I feel like it always brings back Russian language, like I'm always concerned about that because I don't know how to read it. It's not English, so I just am under the impression, but I'm solely using public models right now, right? Like I'm doing threat intel and stuff. I'm pretty good about, not putting client data in. So who knows? Maybe soon I'll be trusting a little bit more with local LLMs and hoping I don't, burn a place down accidentally.
Well, Skyler, did you have any final thoughts?
No, other than AI is an incredible tool, but also very scary in the wrong hands.
It is, and going back to your our topic about the financial institution and stuff, we had this other gig, right, where they were very curious about their CIO's voice being cloned, and I actually dug into whether or not we could use generative AI to do real time voice, you know, duplication, I guess is what I'm going to call it. And what I found was that you basically need a dedicated password cracking rig to be able to get there because everything I tested was not effective. So to, you mentioned in the soundboards earlier and stuff, if you're using generative AI to social engineer people over the phone, you definitely need a good soundboard, something that lets you map out your pretext in a conversation. And you've got to have that experience with the call center first to kind of know, well, not a specific call centers generically, to kind of know how the flow of the conversations go. And yeah, man, that was really cool gig you did for sure.
Yeah, because we did day one with you and then day two with me. And I think looking at the timestamps of our chat, I think it took a total of 2 minutes for you to get admin creds reset live over the phone with the help desk agent.
Yeah, that guy was all in. He was like, "Hey, good to see you." They were pretty close, I guess, or something. I don't know, but it definitely worked.
I mean, when you see the CIO's phone number being spoofed, or you see it on your caller ID at your help desk phone, and hey, it's also his voice saying that there's a breach and we need to reset some passwords. Like, oh, help desk agent, this is my time to shine.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was not the case on day
so
two.
Sad.
Oh, I know. But I believe the result of that, after you had talked to the CIO, Shane, was that they just pulled that guy off the phones immediately and sent him through.
Well, no. So it so happened. I found out that the call center agent was already on his 2 weeks notice. So they basically just gave him the white collar package and was like, "Okay, you take off. We'll pay you for the rest of 2 weeks." But I didn't know that at the time. So
yeah,
that could have been why it was successful because yours wasn't, and it was just as well prepared.
Yeah,
I don't think
my
it
dude
was
Johnny on the spot.
Yeah, he really gave you a bunch of shit tests for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I think what gave it away was it was kind of a fumble on my part because we did the Farrago digital soundboard, so we had like 80 something tiles of different sounds that we created, and I had hit one, but I accidentally double clicked, so it started to talk, and then it abruptly stopped the audio, and then said it again in the exact same way. And it was that moment that dude's tone changed, and he knew something was up, and so he was asking me all sorts of questions and asking me to repeat things just to see if it sounded the same. Like, this dude knew what he was doing. So I was proud of him.
Yeah, no, that's a good catch. Phones cut out all the time. People repeat themselves all the time. It's kind of a bummer though. But
yeah,
I guess that's tactical ops section. Make sure you only click a button once.
Yeah,
especially when you're using a soundboard.
I learned my lesson.
Yep. Well, I don't mean to bring in that you weren't successful on your call because you definitely put in that work, man, and it sucked to see.
If anything, I just wanted to put in the contrast of like what happened the first day when you had that guy, someone who didn't care. He was already on the way out.
I'm out of here anyway.
And then you had somebody who knew what they were doing, who was well versed in what to look for. I think that, if anything, enhanced that experience of that pen test to show what happens when you have proper training and you have people that apply it.
Well, and kudos to their team too. We can't really talk about them, but at the end of the day, their security team and their call center were very communicative. So you had that going against you too for the day 2 call.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we've gone through a few applications because people have impersonated each other internally.
So why should you hire me?
All right. Well, I do want to thank Shane Jones for joining us today, and I want to thank all of you for listening. Security Noise is a production of TrustedSec LLC. If your organization have any questions about information security, TrustedSec can help. Give us a call or visit www.trustedsec.com. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.